Came to the question, who was Joseph's Pharaoh? And then the corollary to that question, of course, is, well, while we're on the subject, who's the Pharaoh of the Exodus also? So the Exodus happens 430 years later. Who's that Pharaoh? While we're talking about pharaohs, let's name them. So, James, to go to something you told me, let's be crystal clear. There is great disagreement here. There is no consensus here. There are a number of different opinions and answers to the two questions that I'm about to answer. So, what you should hear is anything that comes out of this TV next is Rich's opinion about who they are, and it's not rock solid. And guys a lot smarter than Rich do not agree with him. The person I'm going to quote in these two answers is Dr. David Roll. You've met Dr. David Roll. He's an Egyptologist. He is agnostic, but he believes the Bible to be accurate history. So he's an Egyptologist who's digging in the sand, looking at the history, and he's looking at the scriptures, and he believes that although he doesn't believe in God necessarily, he believes the nation of Israel recorded an accurate history. He believes he's identified both the Pharaoh of Joseph's Pharaoh as well as the Pharaoh of the Exodus. And so I believe of anyone who's done work here, his makes the most sense. And so I'm going to allow him to answer those two questions for me. It should be turned on. Thank you, brother. It was not. Well, that's how I write. So let's start out with Joseph's Pharaoh. Who is Joseph's Pharaoh? Rich's opinion. No, forget that. Dr. David Roll's opinion, after great research, a guy who's an Egyptologist, a guy who's tied the history of the Bible to the history of Egypt. Let's let him answer this question.
David believes these events occurred during the reigns of two important Middle Kingdom pharaohs.
This key time is during the co-regency between Senusret III and his son Amenemhat III. I believe this is the time of the famine, and that Amenemhat was Joseph's pharaoh. Amenemhat is depicted with worry lines. His ears are turned out so that he can listen to the concerns of the people. He's not depicted in the usual bland way that you see in all the other statues of past and future pharaohs. And I think this is an indication that in his time, Egypt was experiencing serious problems. And guess what? He builds his pyramid right next to Bahr Yosef, the waterway of Joseph.
So Dr. David Roll believes it's Amenemhat III. For other reasons as well, he is Joseph's Pharaoh. You heard some of the reasons he believes that. So he believes that he is the Pharaoh that Joseph interpreted his dreams. Okay? So that's the first answer. The second answer, again, I'll allow Dr. David Roll to answer. This is the identification of the Pharaoh of the Exodus. And again, he'll explain some of the reasons he believes that this is the Pharaoh, and I'll let him talk first.
One of the great moments in Egyptian history is the collapse of Egyptian civilization, when these foreigners invade, these Hyksos rulers come in and destroy the land, and the Egyptian native rule is completely suppressed. Egypt is on its knees. That's what we see in the archaeological evidence of this period. And it only happens once in 1,000 years of Egyptian history. If we can link this to a very famous tradition told to us by an Egyptian priest called Manetho, he wrote a history of Egypt in the 3rd century BC. And what we end up with is a story like this. In the reign of a king called Dudimose, one of the last kings of the 13th dynasty, in his reign, God smote the Egyptians. And God here is singular. You would expect to see, and the gods smote the Egyptians, but you don't. You see God smote the Egyptians. And then, because of the smiting, whatever the smiting is, foreigners, people of obscure race, invade Egypt from the north, and they conquer the land without striking a blow, is the term. And why? Because God smote the Egyptians. Something had happened to devastate Egypt, which made them unable to defend themselves. And these marauding hordes took over the whole country. And we call this the Hyksos period. And they enslaved the Egyptians. But the point is, they could have defended themselves. They had a mighty army, except for the fact that God had smitten the Egyptians.
Now, I do wish he had made that final point a little differently. Do you remember how God smote the Egyptian army? It was in the Red Sea. He destroyed the army. It made them easy picking for the Hyksos people that came out of Canaan and for a period of time ruled Egypt. He has tied all that together as the fall of Egypt to the Hyksos was the fall of the Egyptian army in the Red Sea. Dudimos was the Pharaoh of all of that. So hopefully, before I go to Sandy's question and deal with that, so hopefully I've answered the mail. Amenhotep III and Dudimos are the Pharaoh, Joseph's Pharaoh, and the Pharaoh of the Exodus. Again, Dr. David Roll's opinion, the best I've heard of anyone on this topic. It is not Ramses. Yes, Sandy.
Something I mentioned earlier with the other class, but do you think that's why when the Israelites left Egypt with Moses, that God told them, don't go by the way of the sea?
We definitely know that God, oh, I'm sorry.
Because that group was coming through, going to Egypt.
We don't know how quickly the Hyksos people would have invaded Egypt. Once they likely learned that the army had been destroyed in the Red Sea, once they learned that the nation of Egypt was unprotected principally, other than light garrisons and whatever they had available that had not been destroyed in Yam Suf, the Red Sea, then no doubt they would have found this easy pickings. And as that historian said, they took Egypt without a fight, without so much as an arrow flying, because there was no one to defend Egypt. So hopefully that answers the mail. Rich's opinion derived from Dr. David Roll's opinion. And again, there's great disagreement on this point. What I would encourage you to do is Google this. And if you like, go to YouTube and type in Dr. David Roll, R-O-H-L. He's done lectures on Egyptian history and chronology, if this interests you. Now, if this is dry, don't go there because he'll wipe you out. But if this interests you, you've got plenty of hours of entertainment. So hopefully that answered the question. Let's get to our lesson, though, this morning. Israel enters Egypt. So for the last week, or actually last week, we watched the amazing events as everything had been building to this point when Joseph was going to finally say, I am Joseph, your brother. We watched it happen. It was it was filled with raw energy and emotion. They wept on each other's shoulders. We saw, if we had any doubt in our mind, Joseph was not harboring anything against his brothers. He loved his brothers dearly. He wanted to understand, had they repented? He wanted to understand, were they in a different place? Were they different men than the ones who almost killed him and ultimately sold him into Egyptian slavery? He wanted to know that, but he dearly loved them. And we saw that as they wept together, as he wept on their neck. We did spend some time, I must admit, talking about the responsibility of man and the sovereignty of God, definitely as Joseph saw it. And I would remind you, he told his brothers, you're the ones who sold me into slavery. He's going to bring it back up in chapter 50. What you did was evil, but God meant it for good. God used what you were doing, your fallen nature, you were doing what you wanted to do, it was wicked, but God in the background sovereignly manipulated to accomplish what he wanted accomplished. And that was his point. But he'll bring it back up in chapter 50, so we will get to see it again. He went on to tell them that, hey, there's 5 more years of famine still coming. You need to go get dad. You need to move to Egypt. Here, I will provide for you. Here, I will protect you. Here, look at all that we have. Look at all the grain we've stored up. I can provide for you. Pharaoh got wind of what was going on. He came over to Joseph's mansion. He said, I'll send wagons. We'll pick everybody up, bring everybody here. Don't worry about your stuff. Whatever you need, I will provide you. That's what Pharaoh did. Just pointing to how much he appreciated what Joseph had done for the nation of Egypt. Saved them. They would have been destroyed. They would have been ruined. Now, we ended right here last week. So that's the brothers, that's the 11, while Joseph is back in Egypt. So they went up out of Egypt and came to the land of Canaan to their father Jacob. And they told him, Joseph is still alive, and he's ruler over all the land of Egypt, and his heart became numb, for he did not believe them. Why would he? He's been dead for 22 years. He hasn't heard anything. Why would he think he's alive? And let's pretend for a moment he is alive. Why would he be the ruler, the second most powerful man in Egypt? He's like, you can picture him. Is this a joke? You know, what's happening here? Then we're told in verse 27, but when they told him all the words that Joseph said, so they continued to talk, and Joseph said this, and Joseph said that. And when he saw the wagons that Joseph had sent to carry him, so you can imagine they're talking, and Egyptian wagons are pulling up in their front yard. And all of a sudden we read, that the spirit of their father Jacob revived. And Israel, Jacob, said, "It is enough. Joseph, my son, is still alive. I will go and see him before I die." So you can imagine the joy that floods his heart, but I did sort of set it up. But surely he wonders, is it the right decision to leave the promised land? Hasn't God promised us the promised land? I left it once under the direction of Isaac to go secure a wife. It took me 20 years to get back. Is this really a good idea? Surely he was wondering that. Let's be honest. Does God need Egypt to save them from a famine? No. God can save in any way he wants. And so Jacob's wrestling with, does he want me to take my family to Egypt? And I bet we would have doubts if we were in Jacob's shoes. And I suspect, and you're going to see it, he has doubts. I would remind you, following the events at Shechem, and you remember those events when they killed all the men, they set them up and had them circumcised, that whole deal. God appeared to him. Let me get there. God appeared to Jacob again when he came from Padan Aram and blessed him. And God said to him, "Your name is Jacob. No longer shall your name be called Jacob, but Israel shall be your name." So he called his name Israel. And God said to him, "I'm God Almighty. Be fruitful and multiply. A nation and a company of nations shall come from you. Kings shall come from your own body. The land that I gave to Abraham and Isaac, I give to you, and I give this land to your offspring after you." Surely he had to wonder, should I leave the promised land just because it would be easier? Just because Joseph said I should? Should I do that? Or would that be sin? Would that be a lack of faith? Would that be me not trusting God? Surely he wondered that. We'll see it soon enough. By the way, we're stuck in the same place we've been for weeks. Joseph is still 39. Jacob is still 130. Moses is honed in on all these events surrounding the famine and everything that's going on and the back and forth that's occurring to Egypt, and we're like locked in. But time will start advancing after this. In your notes, I provided you a 14-point outline of chapter 46. If you like those kind of things, it's there for you. I'm not going to read it to you, but that sets us up for the lesson today. His sons have come back, the 11. He's convinced that Joseph is alive. Joseph wants him to move to Egypt. But there's this nagging, should I, in his head, I do believe. Any questions before we advance the lesson? Okay. Israel enters Egypt. Verse 1. So Israel took his journey with all that he had, and he came to Beersheba and offered sacrifices to the God of his father Isaac. Now, the first thing, well, a number of things actually. So Israel takes a journey. He loads up everything that he has. He packs up the wagons. To use an old ditty, he loads up his truck and he moves to not Beverly and not even Goshen yet. He goes to Beersheba. And there in Beersheba, he offers sacrifices to the God of his father Isaac. So he's heard all of this happening. He's wrestling with what he should do. And he decides not to go to Egypt first, but to go to Beersheba. Now, you probably do not remember where Beersheba is, but that's okay. So he's in Hebron. The trip to Avaris, which is where he's going to end up in Goshen, that's where we know where he's headed, 200 miles. He starts the trip, but he doesn't go. He stops about 25 miles into the trip, still in the promised land. He stops in Beersheba, and there he offers sacrifices to God. Now, you and I should probably be wondering, why did he stop in Beersheba? Well, let's puzzle through this. In Beersheba, his grandfather had once lived. Going to Genesis 21, Abraham planted a tamarisk tree in Beersheba, and it was there he called upon the name of Yahweh, the Olam El, the everlasting God. And Abraham sojourned many days in the land of Philistines in Beersheba. This was a place where Abraham had worshiped the true and living God, but it's more than that. It's not just Abraham, it's Isaac. If we jump to Genesis 26, from there he, that's Isaac, went up to Beersheba. And Yahweh appeared to him the same night and said, I am the God of Abraham, your father. Fear not, for I am with you. I will bless you. I will multiply your offspring for my servant Abraham's sake. So he, Isaac, built an altar there, and he too called upon the name of Yahweh there, and he pitched his tent there. It seems to me that he's following the tradition of his dad and his granddad, going to a place where they had worshiped Yahweh, going to a place where Isaac had built a altar and offered sacrifices, and he shows up there and offers sacrifices too. And what do you think he's asking Yahweh to tell him? Should I go to Egypt or should I stay? God, I know what Joseph says, and I know it makes sense from a human perspective, but what should I do? That's what I think he's wondering. He's crying out to Yahweh, what should I do? He's at the edge of leaving the promised land. He's done that once before. He's about to do it again, but he needs to make sure, God, this is your plan for my life. Verse 2. And God spoke to Israel in visions of the night. These are likely dreams. And said, Jacob, Jacob. And in this dream, Jacob responds, here I am. So it was in Beersheba where God had met with Abraham. It was in Beersheba where God had met with Isaac. And it's in Beersheba as Jacob's trying to understand God's will that God meets via a dream with Jacob. And he calls out to him, Jacob, Jacob. And in this dream, Jacob responds, here I am. Now I want to make an observation and a point of application. So the observation, and Rob, I thought of you because I think you and I have talked about this. Notice this verse. God spoke to Israel in visions of the night and said, Jacob, Jacob. Thank you, Rich. Here's my point. I know that someone smarter than me who will remain unnamed, he's going to be with the Lord anyway, he says that every time Israel's name is used, he's doing something good. And when Jacob's name is used, he's doing something not as good. Well, look at this verse. God speaks to Israel and he says Jacob. Now, maybe you'd say, well, this is because of his lack of faith. I don't think so. I think what we find here is Jacob and Israel are used interchangeably. They're the names of the same person and they're just kind of used interchangeably. But nonetheless, I just want you to see that. But there's a more important point of application. Jacob, Israel, is wanting to hear from God. He's wanting to get an answer from God. He's there to hear from God. And we get it. But here's the question that Rich has to ask himself. When I pray, am I expecting to hear from God? Am I expecting to hear the small, still voice of God? Or am I just showing up to run through a list of things? Because I have a great list. We put out great lists that help us pray for one another. But we need to be careful that those lists don't just become a list for us to recite and run off. Because it's in that list where we're asking God, speak into my heart. Help me hear your direction for my life. I desperately need to hear. When we read the scriptures, we're hearing directly from God because all scripture is God-breathed. It's inspired by God. It's theonosis. But are we expecting to hear from God? Are we expecting to go beyond those black words right to our heart? Are we listening to that still small voice of God? It had been many years earlier. He was leaving the promised land for the first time. He was headed to Mesopotamia to gather a wife. That would take 20 years, by the way. Here's what we read. And he, that's Jacob, came to a certain place and stayed that night because the sun had set. Taking one of the stones of the place, he put it under his head, or likely above his head. And he lay down in the place to sleep. And he dreamed, and behold, there was a ladder set up on the earth, and the top of it reached to heaven. And behold, the angels of God were ascending and descending on it. And behold, Yahweh stood above it, and he said, I am Yahweh, the God of Abraham, your father, the God of Isaac. The land on which you lie, I will give to you and to your offspring. Your offspring shall be like the dust of the earth, and shall spread abroad to the west and to the east and to the north and to the south. In you and in your offspring shall all the families of the earth be blessed. Behold, I am with you and will keep you wherever you go and bring you back to this land, the promised land that you're getting ready to exit. For I will not leave until I have done what I promised you. And you see, what he's wanting to know is, should I leave this promised land that God has promised me? And we get it. We would be doing the same thing. Verse 3. And in this dream, Yahweh speaks to him. He cries out, here I am. Then we're told 7 things that God tells him. We'll just walk our way through them beginning in verse 3. Then he said, that's Yahweh, that's God, I am God, the God of your father. Do not be afraid to go down to Egypt, for there I will make you into a great nation. You saw 4 things just run by real quick. We'll just touch upon them. First, he says, I am El. That's the abbreviated form of Elohim. I am God. I'm the one true God. I am the creator God. I'm the ever-living God. But then he goes on to say, I'm the God of your father. I am the God who your father worshiped and offered sacrifices on this very altar. I am the God who your grandfather worshiped in this very place. I am the God of your fathers, he could have easily said. But then he gets right to where the rubber meets the road, doesn't he? Do not be afraid to go to Egypt. Now, I believe Jacob was very afraid to go to Egypt. He was not sure this was a good decision. And he was right to be very afraid. He had not been told to ever leave the promised land. He had not been told directly, hey, don't worry, man, just come and go as you please. And here God tells him, do not be afraid to go to Egypt. Now, we've seen this phrase over and over and over again. In fact, for me to even talk about it almost gets embarrassing to the number of times that God has told the patriarchs, do not be afraid. Do not fear. And guess what he would say to you and I today? I don't care what's going on in your life. I don't care what's happening. I don't care what it is. Do not be afraid. If you're a child of God, you belong to the King of the universe. He has promised to never leave you nor forsake you. Do not be afraid. But this do not be afraid is very specific. But to remind us, I love Isaiah 41, fear not, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you. I will help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand. I've got your back. I will take care of you. Paul told Timothy that God has not given us the spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. And just as God is telling Jacob, don't be afraid to go to Egypt, God would tell us, I don't care what it is. If you're walking with me, you have no reason to fear. Do not be afraid. And then fourthly, as he tells them, do not be afraid to go to Egypt, in Egypt, I will make you a great nation. Now, this is part of what Jacob's been worried about. How am I going to leave the promised land? How does this fit into the plan of God? And here God says clearly, don't be afraid to go. And in fact, it's in Egypt that I will make you into this mighty nation. Now, today we're about to be exposed to 2 different numbers. 66 is one count. 70 is another count of the number of folks, 66, who left Canaan and went into Egypt. And we'll talk about that number. But when you factor in slaves and all of that, it's even bigger than that. But here's the overarching point. God is telling him, I will take that little family tribe nation, whatever its total count is, and in Egypt, I will grow it into a great nation. I don't know what number you're thinking about, but we'll talk about it in a moment. Verse 4, as we continue on the things that Yahweh is telling Jacob in this dream. I myself will go down to Egypt, or go down with you to Egypt. I will also bring you up again, and Joseph's hand shall close your eyes. 3 things that go by quickly. Oh, question? Oh, sorry. Thank you. Verse 4. I'm not going to read again, but you can see it. So you see the 5th thing? I will go down to Egypt with you. Now, what he's not saying is, listen, I'm going to load up a donkey and make the trip with you. That's not what he's saying. What he's saying is, I will be with you. Guaranteed the promise of the presence of God. God will indeed, as the writer of Hebrews said, never leave us nor forsake us. Am I on the right verse there? Can y'all tell me? Am I on verse 4? Okay. Right there. Okay. Make sure I'm in the right place. Number 6. Not only will I be with you in Egypt, or as he expressed, I'm going to Egypt with you, I will bring you up out of Egypt. Now, by way of implication, I will bring you up out of Egypt and where? Into the promised land. Am I on the wrong slide right now? Okay, I thought I saw a look. So a promise to bring them up out of Egypt, and ultimately with the implication that I will bring you back to the promised land. Now, what he doesn't say is, oh, and by the way, that'll be 430 years from now. Now, I don't know how you picture 430 years. If you say it fast enough, it doesn't seem very long. The United States has only existed as a nation for 250 years, less than 250. 430 is a long time. He doesn't tell him that, but he does promise, I will make you a great nation. I will bring you out. Yes, Amy.
I thought in the particular verse there, where it says, I will bring you up again, I thought he was talking about when he died, they take Jacob back to be buried there, because then it says, and Joseph's hand will close your eyes like in death.
Great
I
question.
thought he was talking about that you're actually going to come back here when you die.
So great question. Scholars disagree here about the you. The you is singular. I will bring you up. And the scholars who would hold that point say God is talking to Jacob, and he's telling, don't worry, I will bring you out of Egypt. By the way, he will do that. Jacob will be buried in the cave at Machpelah, where the other patriarchs are buried. God indeed will bring him out of Egypt after he dies. That is absolutely true. Other scholars believe this is a promise to bring the nation of Israel out of Egypt, the collective you. Well, guess what? That's true too. We read the book of Exodus, and God in 430 years will indeed bring the nation of Israel out of Egypt. So which is it, Rich? Both are true. Let's just go with both. We can fight about it later. Both are absolutely true. God will bring Jacob individually out after following his death, and God will bring the nation of Israel out in 430 years under the mighty hand of God with all the riches of Egypt. They will plunder the lands. But look at the seventh point that God says. And the boy, 39 years old now, the young man who you thought was dead for the last 22 years, who you've mourned over, is the one who will close your eyes when you die. That's what he's promised Israel, and that's exactly what happens. By the way, he'll live another 17 years. He doesn't know that, of course, but that's exactly what will happen. So fear not, I will be with you. I will make the trip with you. I will take care of you. I will grow the nation there. I will bring the nation out, or at least bring you out. Oh, and by the way, just as a side note, your boy who you thought was dead, who you just learned is alive again, he's the one who's going to close your eyes. Just thought you should know. Any questions before we advance the story? What a beautiful time in Beersheba for Jacob. Do you think he's ready to go to Egypt now? Absolutely. All the fears are assuaged. He's ready to go. The mic is coming. I'll fill the space with noise for just a second. So you can imagine that he is no longer concerned. He is no longer afraid. He is no longer worrying. He is certain this is God's plan for him individually and God's plan for the nation collectively. Yes.
I just to verify what I'm thinking. So they brought Jacob before they left Egypt in the Exodus. So they brought him first to be buried.
Yes. So to answer this directly, he's going to die in 17 years. We're going to see his death. They're going to take him out of Egypt and bury him in the cave of Machpelah. We're going to see all that play out. And that's well before the Exodus. In fact, to nail the number down, it's 413 years before the Exodus. Anything else? Okay. Continuing to advance the story. Verse 5. Then Jacob set out from Beersheba. Of course he did. He's ready to go now. The sons of Israel carried Jacob, their father, their little ones, their wives, in the wagons that Pharaoh had sent to carry them. You can imagine, as we're going to read, they've loaded up everything. The wagons are loaded. They burned the ships. They're off to Egypt. They're leaving no one behind. They're not hedging their bets. Well, let's leave a couple of sons and grandsons behind. Everyone is headed off to Egypt. Verse 6. They also took their livestock, their goods, which they had gained in the land of Canaan, and came into Egypt, Jacob and all his offspring with him. You should picture the family of Israel, the tribe of Israel, moving in from Canaan to Egypt. Further description, verse 7, his sons. How many sons did he have? 11, 12 total, but one's already in Egypt, so the 11 are moving. His sons' sons. These would be grandsons. We're about to see the listing of grandsons that Moses provides us. With his daughters. How many daughters are we aware of that Jacob had? Only one. Her name is Dinah. Remember, she was raped by Shechem, in the son of the king of Shechem. But it's clear from this text that Jacob had other daughters. We'll look at this in a moment. His daughters and his sons' daughters. We will refer to those as granddaughters. So he has multiple granddaughters. What's interesting? In the listing provided of a total of 70, and then it's boiled down to 66, and we'll talk about why, only one daughter is listed, Dinah, and only one granddaughter is listed. I say that so you understand the list that Moses is presenting to us is curated. It is not extensive. It is not all the daughters and granddaughters. It for sure is missing some. There were plural, and there's only one of each listed. But we'll see all of that soon enough. I just want you to be aware of it. Equally, I want you to see that what they were bringing into Egypt would have been substantial. Jacob is a very wealthy man. He's bringing all of his goods. He's bringing all of his livestock. This is a massive trip, 250 miles total to get to Egypt. Now, before we get to our next verses, we're going to be exposed to two numbers, 70 and 66. Scholars are all over the map as to how those two numbers are derived. So I want you to understand that up front. I'm going to show you what I think Moses is trying to show us. I could easily be wrong. Truth in advertising. People much smarter than me have different ways of getting there. There's a lot of ways, in fact, to get there. I'm going to show you what I think Moses is trying to tell us. What he's going to do, though, so that you hear it in advance, is he's going to start with each of the wives of Israel. So he's going to start with Leah, and he's going to talk about Leah's 6 sons and some grandsons and children. Then he's going to move and talk about Zilpah. That's Leah's handservant and the 2 sons and some grandsons that are born. Then he's going to move on to Rachel, the 2 sons and grandsons and others. And then he's going to move to Bilhah and talk about the 2 sons. So that's how he's going to approach this. He's not going to go in the order of birth. He's going to start with Leah, do all 6, then move to Zilpah, do those 2, then move to Rachel, do those 2, then move to Dan and Naphtali and do those 2. Now, what I'm going to do, so that you see the number 70 and how I'm getting there as it's happening, so when he talks about 70, you'll understand how I got there. I'm going to show portions of that document that I uploaded. So this is just a piece of it. This is the piece that belongs to Leah. And so I'm going to read the verses. You have the verses, but I'm going to leave the picture up so you can see what I'm doing. Make sense? Okay, so let's get at it. Verse 8. These are the names of the descendants of Israel who came into Egypt. Pause for a second. Now, what he's going to do is only talk about the descendants that came into Egypt from Leah. But he doesn't say that for a few verses. He's going to say that in a couple of verses. He's going to get there, but at first you don't realize what he's doing, but you will. So he starts out with descendants of Leah, and he takes them in birth order. These are the names of the descendants of Israel who came into Egypt: Jacob and his sons, Reuben, Jacob's firstborn, and the sons of Reuben, Hanak, Palu, Hezron, and Carmi. So you see what he did. He starts out with the firstborn all the way over here, number 1, and then the 4 sons, which make a total of 5 if you're keeping count at home. And I'm just showing you how I get to the counts I get to so you see it as it's happening. So he first deals with the first son, Reuben. Notice what he doesn't say. He doesn't talk about Reuben's wives or wife. We have no idea. We believe she was there, or if there was 2, she was there. They were there, but we just don't know. It doesn't deal with it. Verse 10. The sons of Simeon: Jemuel, Jamin, Ohad, Jachin, Zohar, Shaul, the son of a Canaanite woman. The corrupting forces of the Canaanites continuing to work its way through the family of Israel. We're reminded why God is taking them to Egypt. It's there he's going to protect them. The Egyptians will have nothing to do with them because they see them as unclean because they're sheep herders, they're shepherds. And it's there he will grow them into this mighty nation, protected from the corrupting forces of the Egyptians. But you can see we go to the second-born son of Leah, the second-born son overall, Simeon, and you see Simeon's sons. There's a total of, 5. Jemuel, Jamin, Ohad, Jachin, Zohar, and 1 born of a Canaanite woman. Well, then there's at least 2 wives here, maybe more. They're not mentioned at all. They're probably part of the people going in. The list is being curated. I just want you to see that. But here you see how I'm counting. You can see they're all counted up there all the way to verse 11. In verse 11, the sons of Levi: Gershon, Kohath, and Merari. So we have 4 total, Levi, and then 3 sons that are all going into Egypt. By the way, just so you know, and let me find my place here, Kohath will be where the tribe of Levi descends from. And so that's 4 more going into the list, and I can't see my number from my little laptop, but it brings us to 16, it looks like, as we're counting. Verse 12, the sons of Judah, Onan, Shelah, Perez, and Zerah. But and Onan died in the land of Canaan. So and Onan will not be going into Egypt because they died in Canaan. Now you remember, if we can talk about it for just a minute, the sordid details of Judah. If you remember, Judah married a Canaanite woman who's unnamed. He had 3 sons, Onan, and Shelah. Was evil, or actually, he married off to a Canaanite woman named Tamar. If you remember, was evil, and what did God do to him? Killed him. So what did Judah do? He gave Onan, his second-born son, to Tamar. He acted evilly as well, and what did God do with him? He killed him. So then Judah promised Shelah to Tamar, but what? He never intended to give Shelah to Tamar, because he's beginning to think Tamar's a black widow, and I'll be down all my sons. So he lies to Tamar. He sends her back to her father's house, never intending to keep his word. After she realizes this, she dresses up as a cult prostitute. He ultimately goes into her. He gets her pregnant, and she has twins, Perez and Zerah. But the only 3 sons that are going to go into the promise, or into Egypt from the promised land, who are descending from Judah himself, and Shelah, Perez, and Zerah were up to 20. Does that make sense? Because and Onan died. They're not going to enter the land. And that's what I think Moses is trying to tell us. Verse 13, the sons of Issachar, Tola, Puvah, Yob, and Shimron. So here we have Issachar, and we have his 3 sons. Okay, so 4 sons. 23, and that brings us to 27 in our running count. And then finally, and by the way, Issachar was the 5th-born son of Leah, but the 9th-born son overall. You see what he's done. He's dealing with them in blocks of women, not in order, biological order. Verse 14, the sons of Zebulon. Zebulon's the 6th and final born son of Leah to Israel, and the 10th born son overall. And we see him, and we see 3 grandsons, Sered, Elon, and Jaleel. And that brings us to a total of 31. So if you're keeping score at home, we're up to 31 from Leah. And that brings us to verse 15. These are the sons of Leah whom she bore to Jacob in Padan Aram, together with his daughter Dinah. A new person we haven't talked about. We've talked about the 6 sons. We've now talked about Dinah. Altogether, his sons and daughters numbered 33. Okay, so let's make a couple things. All of these kids were born in Mesopotamia. They were born in Padan Aram before he came back into the promised land. That's the first thing Moses tells us. But then he tells us that all of them numbered 33. So what do I think he's trying to tell us? I think he's trying to tell us that when you factor out and Onan, and you bring in Dinah, and you count Israel, because he'll be counted nowhere else, you get a total of this group of people being 33. That's what I think he's trying to tell us. Now, could there be other things that he's counting here and he's not counting Jacob? Quite possibly. But I definitely think he's taken and Onan out. If we were to move them back out, that would bring it to 35, or back in, that'd bring it to 35. If we took Israel out, that'd bring it to 34. If we took Dinah out, that'd bring it to 33. So there's ways we can get there, but he just listed Dinah. But maybe he doesn't mean to count her here. So there's a lot of ways you can get to 33. I need you to see it. But I think what he's doing is showing the block, Leah and including Israel, that went into Egypt. Any questions before we keep advancing this? Genealogy. Okay, let's keep going. That's the overall picture, by the way. If you download the document, that's what it looks like, as well as it has a key on the bottom to interpret all the stuff that's up there. Okay, so let's go to verse 16. We're now moving to look at the next the next block of sons. The sons of Gad, Ziphion, Haggai, Shunai, Esbon, Eri, Erodai, and Erlili. So although Moses does not specifically say it here, he's dealing now with the sons of Zilpah. He'll say that in just a moment. Gad is the firstborn son of Zilpah, but the 7th born son overall, and I don't have the right picture up. There we go. So here's Gad, number 34, if we're keeping count, and the sons. All the way down, we're now up to 41. if we're keeping a running total. Verse 17, the sons of Asher, Imnah, Ishva, Ishvi, Beri, with Sarah, their sister. Now that would be a granddaughter, right? That's not a daughter, that's a granddaughter to Jacob. And the sons of Beri, Heber and Malchi. So we've got the son, grandsons, and a granddaughter, great-grandsons, all leaving Canaan to go to Egypt, and the count is up to 49 if we're keeping score here. And those are all descending, as you can see, from Asher there in verse 17. Verse 18, these are the sons of Zilpah, whom Laban gave to Leah, his daughter, and these were 16 in all, and that 16 in all brings our total from 33 plus 16 to 49. And there's the count. And again, the count's on the document if you're wanting to keep score at home. 2 sons, 2 more sons, 11 grandsons, 1 granddaughter, one granddaughter, she's the only one named, and 2 great-grandsons make the list so far. And that brings us to verse 19. Now we're dealing with the descendants of Rachel. So let's get those up. This is much easier. The sons of Rachel, Jacob's wife, Joseph and Benjamin. Whew, I love it when we can keep it short. So, okay, now we're only talking about 2. By the way, that's her first and second born child. That's number 11 and 12 overall. But that's the 2 that are born to Rachel. And then you can see, we're aware of it, and I'll just read the verses. Verse 20, and to Joseph in the land of Egypt were born Manasseh and Ephraim, whom Asenath, the daughter of Potiphar, the priest of On, born to him. So those were not born in Canaan. Those were born in Egypt. So keep that in mind. They're not in Canaan right now. They would not be making the trip. They're already in Egypt. And you'll notice they're highlighted in yellow because these 3 people are in Egypt. But you'll notice they're part of the count of 70, which we'll talk about in a moment because you're going to see it in the Bible. So if you're like, where's 70 come from? Don't worry, it's coming. And Sandy has a question. And I'll try to point at you with a pointer. They taught me better than that.
Is it the reason you're making the big deal about the numbers is because there appears to be some kind of discrepancy at the end? Is that why you're doing that?
So he's going to say specifically 70, and he's going to say specifically 66. I want you to see how I think he's getting to 70 and what his point is, and how he's getting to 66 and what his point is. Now, theologians are all over the map as to how he gets to 70 and 66 and what the point is. I'm just giving you my opinion. I want you to know the opinion. I want you to see it and in context to kind of understand what's he trying to say. What's the point? Because Moses has a point because God is the author of Scripture. So he has a point in giving us this list. I'm just wanting to get at the possible point. But I'm giving you the running count so far. And so you can see there, as we look at these, we see first Manasseh and Ephraim that are born to Joseph, verse 21. The sons of Benjamin, Bela, Becher, Ashbel, Gera, Naaman, Ehi, Rosh, Muppim, Huppim, and Ard. It reminds me of, the Muppets, right? You're like, Benjamin, who named your kids, right? And I'm definitely not going to hire you to name mine. We've already looked at this because it's kind of surprising that Benjamin, as young as he is, he's the 12th born son. He's about 30 years old at this time, has 10 sons. What we're not told is how many wives he has. Is this 10 sons from one wife or 10 sons from 2 wives? We don't simply know. They're not listed. We're not told. Did they go likely from Canaan into Egypt? Yeah, we have every reason to believe everyone took their wife and leave them behind. He already said they did. They're just not part of the listing of people he provided. He curated the list. That's what I want you to understand. He didn't give us an exclusive, these are all the people. He gave us a very curated list. I would be honest with you. If I didn't know better, I would say he was trying to make it 70. He wanted to land at 70. And he was picking the 70 most prominent to land at 70. There were clearly more. 70, if we have time, we'll look at it at the end. So Sandy worded to me, why would he do that? She's like, why? If we have time, I will answer that question as to why I believe he did this. 70 is a significant number in the Scriptures, and I think he wanted to land on that significant number. We know for a fact it's more than 70 There's daughters that came into Jacob who are not listed. There's granddaughters, because we're told multiple granddaughters, but only one is listed. There's slaves and servants that are not listed. What about all the people they took in Shechem, the females and the children? They're not listed. There's a multitude, and when I say multitude, I mean a small multitude, a couple hundred likely, that actually go. But he curates this list, it seems to Rich, to get to 70, when there's other daughters and granddaughters for sure, and wives that are going. Okay, but hopefully that answered, at least whet your appetite to the possible answer. Verse 22. These are the sons of Rachel who were born to Jacob, 14 persons in all. Now I want to go back, and I want to show you a couple things about this verse, because it's a little surprising. We've watched this with 3 women so far. When he deals with Rachel, he does something totally different that he doesn't do with the other women. Notice when he deals with Rachel, he leads with, these are the sons of Rachel. He didn't do that with the other 3. He just went to the sons, and at the end he said, oh, and by the way, these are the sons of Leah. These are the sons of Zilpah. These are the sons of Bilhah. He leads with that with Rachel. Notice what else he says about Rachel that he doesn't say about anybody else. She's Jacob's wife. He does not say that about any of the other women. Now, why does he? There, for sure, Leah was his wife. I don't know why Moses does that. We could build a lot of ideas. Clearly, that was the woman he wanted to marry. Clearly, that was the woman he planned to marry. Clearly, that was the woman he loved the most. But Moses only refers to her, interesting enough, as Jacob's wife. I just wanted you to see it. Am I at, verse 23. So we'll go to the final one. These are the descendants from Bilhah. This is Rachel's handmaid. So the son of Dan, Husham, so we have, let me get you there. We have Dan and Husham, we're 64 and 65. And then verse 24, the sons of Naphtali, Jaziel, Guni, Jezer, and Shillem. So that brings us up to 65, 66, 67, all the way to 70. So once we take out and Onan and we factor in Israel, we land right at 70. Does that mean it's the right way to do it? I don't know. I think so, but I don't know. So these are the sons of Bilhah, whom Laban gave Rachel his daughter, that she bore to Jacob, 7 persons in all. That final 7 brings us to 70. If you're keeping score at home, here's what we've done. 12 sons, 1 daughter, 51 grandsons, not counting the 2 that died in Canaan, 4 great-grandsons, 1 granddaughter, Israel himself, bringing the total to 70. If we were to bring in and Onan, it would bring it to 72. If we were to take out Israel, it would bring it to 71. But I've told you how I think we got to 70. We just took every person he said, but we have some more things to say. So there's the entire list. You have notes, by the way, if you download that document. It's in Word in case you want to chop it up or change it around. It's ready to go. I've already explained to you that. 26. All the persons belonging to Jacob who came into Egypt, who were his own descendants, not including Joseph's sons' wives, so they're excluded from the list, are 66. Now, wait a minute. I thought we were running for 70. And all of a sudden, we're talking about 66. Notice what he says, the persons who belong to Jacob. We counted Jacob in the list of 70. Does Jacob belong to Jacob? Probably not. I think he takes him out. And I think he takes out those people, not only taking out Israel from the list, but taking out the people that are already in Egypt. And when you take out himself and Joseph and Manasseh and Ephraim, you go from 70 to 66. That's what I think he's now trying to say. I think he's trying to say of the 70, though, not counting Israel, and 3 being there, it's actually 66. What's his point there? I'm not sure I know, other than I think that's the numbers he's getting at, and that's what he's trying to do. Now let's pause for a moment as we're just sort of taking this whole big graph in. I already gave you this. It's more than 70, though, isn't it? Yeah, it's much more. It's curated, no doubt. Now, as you think about this, and let's just say as we think about the wives, and there's at least 12 of those, but we know there's some multiple marriages, probably more than 12 that go in. As we think about additional daughters beyond Dinah, as we think about additional granddaughters beyond the one named, as we think about servants, and as we think about the women and children who were absorbed from Shechem, theologians guess it's 200 to 300 people that go in from Canaan to Egypt. Well, let me tell you what happens in 430 years when they leave Egypt. So let's just say hypothetically 300 go in. God has promised to make a mighty nation. Can he do that? Well, let's just see. This is Numbers 1. The Lord spoke to Moses in the wilderness of Sinai in the tent of meeting, the first day of the second month in the second year. This is a year after leaving Egypt, saying, take a census of all the congregation of the people of Israel by clans, by fathers' houses, according to the numbers of names, every male, head by head, from 20 years old and upward, all Israel in whom are able to go to war, you and Aaron shall list them company by company. He's now demanded a census. In this census will not be included three things: no women, no children under 20, and no one from the tribe of Levi. Goes on to tell us that. They will not be numbered. When you remove all the women, when you remove everyone 20 and below, when you remove all the tribe of Levi, we're told plainly what the number is. It's 603,550. Yes, David, that's exactly right. What your face just said sums it up. Taking out women, taking out children below the age of 20, and taking out servants who are not counted, taking out all of those things, we end up with 603, and the tribe of Levi, 603,550. No wonder theologians tell us 2 to 3 million exited Egypt to go back into the promised land as part of the conquest under Joshua. That's how they get to that number. Did God do exactly what God said he was going to do in Egypt, grow a mighty nation? Absolutely. As they exited 430 years later. And that brings us to verse 27. And the sons of Joseph who were born to him in Egypt were two. We knew that. That's Ephraim and Manasseh. We're just being told that again. And the persons of the house of Jacob who came into Egypt were 70. Now here we move back from that 66 number to 70. That's what I think Moses is telling us. Again, theologians disagree. I'll pause in case there's any questions about anything I've said so far. Again, all of this is given by God for a reason. I'm not sure I understand the reason, but you can see that God knows the number of folks who are going, and Moses seems to curate the list to get us to 70. Anything else before we advance? Verse 28. I'm on 28? I can't quite see the screen yet. 28, okay. He had sent Judah ahead of him to Joseph to show the way before him in Goshen, and they came into the land of Goshen. Okay, so we're back in the story. They're leaving. They've left Canaan. They're headed for Egypt. Jacob looks at Judah and says, go ahead of us. Go to Joseph's house, the Lord of the land, and find out where we're supposed to go. It is interesting that he sends Judah. He doesn't send Reuben and Simeon. Judah has become the default leader of these sons, although he's not the firstborn son. He has become the leader of this group. And Judah is sent ahead to get word to Joseph, we are on the way, where should we go? And Moses doesn't even bury it. He just gives it to us, and they went to the land of Goshen. Don't worry, there'll be more said there. Verse 29. So they've arrived in Goshen. They've come into the land of Goshen. And according to 28, Joseph prepares his chariot, and he goes up to meet Israel, his father, in Goshen. He presents himself to him in Goshen. He falls on his neck and weeps on his neck a good while. The last week, we saw the interaction of Joseph with his brothers as they wept on each other's neck. And here the son who was dead and is now alive is weeping on the neck, and his father is weeping on his neck, as Moses tells us, for a good while. What a reunion. The son you thought has been dead for 22 years, he is alive, and you're hugging his neck right now. That's what's going on. We talked about the wagons, and here you can see Joseph loaded up the chariot. If you were not here for the lesson on chariots, at this point in time, theologians tell us only the Egyptians had the technology of a chariot. This is one of the chariots that came out of King Tutankhamun's pyramid. I think there were a total of 6. We believe that Joseph would have had a chariot much like this. The artist's rendition of this chariot, Joseph would have jumped in his chariot, left wherever his mansion is, and headed to Goshen, to Avaris, to meet with his family who just arrived. He would have pulled up in the front yard, and there he tracked down his dad, grabbed him by the neck, and began to weep on his neck. Thank you, brother. Verse 30. Israel said to Joseph, let me now die, since I've seen your face, and I know that you are alive. It is amazing. Dad looks at him and says, I'm ready to die. I did it on purpose. Am I right? The right verse again? Yeah. Am I there? Yeah. Verse 30 is not there? We're missing verse 30. I'll just read it to you. I'm not sure what happened here. The missing verse. Whoever copied these things for Rich did a poor job. Oh, wait, that was Rich. All right, never mind. So Israel said to Joseph in verse 30, which you don't have, it's a secret verse, let me die since I've seen your face and know that you're still alive. Huh? I don't know what happened to it. We'll just keep running. So again, weeps on his neck. The reality is, though, he's not going to die for 17 more years. Verse 31. Joseph said to his brothers and his father's household, I will go up and tell Pharaoh, and will say to him, my brothers and my father's household who were in the land of Canaan have come to me. And the men are shepherds, for they have been keepers of livestock, and they brought their flocks and their herds and all that he had. So he looks at them, he says, okay, I'm going to Pharaoh, and here's what I'm going to tell him. They're all here, and they're shepherds. They're sheep herders. And they brought a lot of animals, and all their animals are here, because what's he trying to do? He wants to make sure that Pharaoh says, oh, great, I'm so excited they're here. I've given them the land of Goshen, a beautiful land. Please move them there, because the Egyptians saw anyone who handled animals, sheep herders, shepherds, as an abomination. And so Joseph is simply setting up to ensure that his will takes place. But notice what happens next. Joseph talking to his brothers, and when Pharaoh calls you, you are to say to him and says, what is your occupation? You shall say, your servants have been keepers of livestock from our youth even until now. In fact, both we and our father's father, everyone from our line has been sheep herders. Why? In order that you may dwell in the land of Goshen, for every shepherd is an abomination to the Egyptians. He tells them what he's going to say to Pharaoh. He tells them, and when Pharaoh asks you, what is your job? You say, we keep sheep. Our dad kept sheep. Our dad's dad kept sheep. We brought a pile of sheep and animals with us so that it will ensure that you land up in Goshen. Now, I do want to make a point. We made it at the time, but maybe you weren't here. Because the Egyptians view the shepherds, as an abomination. What's ironic is the nation of Israel had reached the point where they have viewed everyone else as an abomination. If you were not an Israelite, you were an abomination. You and I do not have the luxury to do that with those who don't belong to Christ. Never forget the Great Commission. You and I are going to the world with all the gospel. They're not an abomination. They're lost people who desperately need to hear about the love of Christ. So let's not fall in the same trap that ancient Israel did, but rather let you and I, as we look at those who are not worshipers of God, as a chance, an opportunity that they could hear the truth, believe, and be saved. Any questions before I make a final announcement that brings us to the end of chapter 46? God has now brought the family nation of Israel into Egypt. We know the story. We just don't know all the details yet. God is going to there raise a mighty nation that he will one day, 430 years from now, bring out. Yes, ma'am.
God separating them into Goshen, he's always kind of kept his people separate. Like, don't marry, intermarry, don't any of that.
Be you not unequally yoked with unbelievers. God is always be in the world. That's not separated from the world, but not of the world. That's the separation. Don't act like the world. Go into the world, but don't behave like the world. And let's be honest, and this came up in the first class, and I'll say it now. Why is God doing all this? They were in the promised land. This is a lot of effort. They were being corrupted by the Canaanites. You see, what God has done now is placed them in a strong nation, a powerful nation where they can grow under the protection of that powerful nation, a nation who loves Joseph, at least right now, and they're going to enjoy protection, and a nation that will not mess with them because they see them as unclean. It's there God is protecting them and growing them into this mighty nation that he will bring out with his mighty hand. It is the wisdom of God. All of this, we would have never caught it, but they would not, the nation might very well have imploded in Canaan. Being corrupted by their influence. We're going to end with Rich's question, and I'm going to make an announcement.
Keep it short, Rich.
What is in this-
Impossible. Being a numbers guy, I struck by the fact that it took 215 years to go from 1 to 70, and then from 70 to 2 or 3 million. And another thing is that we think about the parting of the Red Sea and the nation of Israel coming through it. Well, if they had 2 million people, it took them 30 days to get through the Red Sea. We have this 10 Commandments scene of everyone kind of sprints and they get through it. But in reality, God moves this entire nation through it, the nation he's grown in the 430 years.
God moves that nation through the Red Sea, and I would argue, and maybe we'll talk about this in the future, in a specially prepared place in the Red Sea that is very easy crossing when you peel back the water. Because they can't go slogging down mud and slogging out mud. They're going to need to go into a Red Sea, a place that's going to destroy Pharaoh's army, but it must be a place that's you can walk down. And there is a place in the Red Sea that meets all of those requirements when you peel back the water. Talk more about that at some other time. Okay, so I have an announcement to make. Where's the sign-up list going around? So there's a sign-up list. If you were not here at the start of the class and you are interested in having dinner with the North American Mission Board folks on Thursday at V Pizza, please stop by the back table on your way out the door and sign up to be a part of that dinner with the missionaries. V Pizza, Thursday at 6 or 6:30. Thursday the 26th, 7th, whatever it is, that Thursday. I'm not going to say anything else. I'm going to pray and get us out the door. I'll get in trouble. Let's pray.